Hello! April was a no-good, hectic, sucky month. But we read some pretty good books, I learned a lot, I experienced a lot, I'm ready just to talk about it and move on. April was defined and shaped by one occurrence. I got pneumonia. I was out of commission for the most part for 2.5 weeks. That being said, I still had some pretty decent reading numbers, but the analytics for the channel were absolutely abysmal, and that's very sad because March was the best month for the YouTube channel by far. I only posted 7 videos. Most of those were vlog videos. Only 50.4 watch hours, which isn't horrible compared to the rest of the months for the history of the channel. Only gained 14 subscribers, but still, I gained subscribers, didn't lose subscribers, and only got 1,303 views, and most of those views were less than 3 minutes. So, in terms of analytics, not the best month, not the worst month, but following March, which was the best month, not the happiest about that. But considering I almost died, I had pneumonia, I was really sick, I'm pretty happy about it. In terms of reading, I read 8 books, 6 novels, 2 works of nonfiction, and I liked them all for the most part. I also was able to finish 7 volumes of manga, thus concluding my second manga series, a manga series that had me in tears. Let's start off by talking about the works of nonfiction. I read Pretty Boys Are Poisonous by Megan Fox. Yes, Megan Fox, the movie star. Megan Fox, who's dating Machine Gun Kelly. Megan Fox, who is now, I guess, a poet. Pretty Boys Were Poisonous started off not that bad. I have definitely read works of poetry that are worse, but it's her first poetry collection, and because she's a celebrity, I imagine it will be her last. A lot of these poems were bad. There was literally a poem that just said, "I hate men" 7 times, which doesn't really seem like poetry to me. If you follow the vlog, I generally am not the biggest fan of modern poetry, but Megan Fox, who from my generation did not love her when they were a teenager, I picked up this poetry collection, I read it in a day and a half, and there were 7 or 8 poems that I liked. The rest were mostly pretty bad, and a few of them were abysmal. That being said, not the worst poetry collection. And I would read another poetry collection from her because she talked a lot about some pretty deep, in-depth, traumatizing things, about domestic abuse, about emotional abuse, essay assault, all that stuff. Very hard to read. These were very visceral poems, and at their best, they were pretty good, very relatable and triggering, and at their worst, it was just amateurish and just overly emotional, seemed very angsty and teenage-like, but all in all, probably 2 out of 5 stars. The second work of nonfiction I've read was Zen and the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury. I've been reading Ray Bradbury's short stories for the last few months, and I've loved almost all of them. I read Fahrenheit 451 some years ago, and it was really dang good. Ray Bradbury is definitely a master of the short story. And Zen and the Art of Writing is just his collection of meditations, his collections of thoughts about how to become an author, about how authors should grow their skills, how they should start off with short stories and then move on to longer works. Ray Bradbury truly is a master of the short story. He'll write about anything. He'll write about the anxiety you have when you're standing in line to meet Santa Claus for the holidays. He'll write about the anxiety you have when you encounter homeless people on the street and how do you want to avoid eye contact with them? Do you want to give them money? What if they're lying? What if they're not really homeless? He'll write about so many different things. He'll write about flying machines. He'll write about dragons. He really is such a versatile author. In many ways, he reminds me of my favorite author, Stephen King, especially in the way that he tackles writing as an art form. Many people believe that you either are artistic or you're not. You either can write or you can't. But Ray Bradbury definitely is on the side of the debate that says writing is a skill that you could build. It has almost nothing to do with innate talent. You work at it, you put enough time into it, you could achieve a level of mastery. And I thought his meditations about how to become a writer were very, very inspiring. And I think a lot of people would find a lot of inspiration, a lot of hope in reading Zen and the Art of Writing. The first novel I want to talk about is Fiend by Peter Stenson. This book was recommended to me by one of my subscribers, and they said it was a zombie apocalypse story from the point of view of a meth addict. And that was incredibly compelling because I'm on a mission to find the greatest zombie apocalypse stories ever told. I love zombie fiction. And I have a lot of experience with drug addicts because I grew up in Las Vegas, and there's a lot of drug addicts in this party city. So I opened up the story, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. But what I got was one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. But it was also so incredibly compelling and original. Genre fiction is not dead. A lot of people think they know what to expect when they pick up a zombie story, and that's what I thought when I picked up Fiend, and I was wrong. A zombie apocalypse story from the point of view of a drug addict looking for their next fix was just so interesting and original. One drug addict character in the narrative can really cause a bunch of plot twists because drug addicts aren't known for being rational. They're not known for making great decisions. They're known for making pretty bad decisions, if I'm being honest. So an entire cast of characters that are all drug addicts in a zombie apocalyptic story, there's a lot of things you're not anticipating. A lot of surprises, a lot of plot twists. And these characters, in many cases, are despicable. But you're still rooting for them because, I guess, what's the alternative? Zombies or meth addicts? But they'll make you so sad when they betray each other, when they steal from each other, when they lie, and they're all on different levels of addiction. They're all on different levels. And it's just such a heartbreaking read, but I think it was just so real and raw. Peter Stetson really has a talent for writing about very controversial subject matter. This book was written like how it reads like a drug addict's telling it. And he just captured that voice perfectly. I'm not sure if this is my book of the month, but it is definitely the most ambitious book I've read in a long time. And Peter Stetson, I looked at his bibliography. He also wrote a book about an adult having relationships with a teenage student. So clearly he's not afraid to tackle controversial subject matter. I may have to give him a try. I'm a Stephen King boy. I love controversial subject matter, particularly when it is told well. And Peter Stetson did a very good job at telling this story in a way that does not glamorize drug use, but also doesn't demonize drug users. And I think that's a pretty important distinction to have. Sula by Toni Morrison. This book gets a lot of love. And I'm not sure if it was just because I had pneumonia and I was really sick, but I did not enjoy this read that much. I feel like there were several things in the plot that weren't needed. It's centered around a very toxic friendship and a very toxic individual. All my homies hate Sula. And the narrative is a little slow, but it does a very good job at portraying like a narcissistic, selfish character in a way that is very relatable and real and realistic. And there's also just some nonsense. I'm surprised that I didn't enjoy this book as much as many people did because 2 people get lit on fire. If that does not sell this book to you, I'm not sure what will. But 2 people got lit on fire, and still it felt like not much was happening. And then the ending was just so haphazard and rushed. I know Toni Morrison gets a lot of love, but I'm not sure I'll return to reading any of her works again. This book was beautiful, but I'm not sure if it was my cup of tea. So I'll say 3 out of 5 stars because I'm not the target audience, but I could definitely recognize that it is a beautiful, masterful work. The next book is a very interesting one because I don't like survival thrillers and I don't like anything that takes place under the ocean because I'm scared of the ocean. It's very big, it's very scary. But my wife read Whale by Daniel Kraus some time ago and she absolutely loved it. She loves all the shark thrillers. She loves that type of thing. But she said she was in tears and that's a very rare thing. So I picked it up and I read this survival story. And this is the survival story of all survival stories that takes place in the ocean. A young man gets caught between a life and death struggle between a sperm whale and a giant squid. And he's trying to survive it. Meanwhile, there's all these constant flashbacks to his upbringing because he had a very abusive, narcissistic, controlling father that everyone loved except for him. Has a dying parent, talks a lot about like the responsibilities that children have towards their parent, while also not letting bad parents off the hook. This book will make you cry a few times. There are some very beautiful passages. The flashbacks can sometimes be triggering. If you had a very abusive parent, you may not find this read to be enjoyable, but I do think it can be a very therapeutic read if read at a proper point in your life. And the depictions of things that were happening under the water, the wildlife, the oceans, they were very realistic and very well researched. He had footnotes at the end. Footnotes are sexy, very well researched work. Not my cup of tea, but it was really dang good. So probably 3 out of 5 stars for me. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher was so much fun. It was whimsical, it was witty, it was playful, it was unserious. T. Kingfisher has a very unserious, playful way of writing. almost Terry Pratchett-esque, without the satirical, mastery. In this world, magic users have very specific magical talents. Like, there's one character who can only resurrect horses, and the main protagonist, our point of view character, can only do magic that's through baking. She can only do baking magic. So, she can make sentient gingerbread men, and her familiar is not a rat, an owl, or a toad. Her familiar is a sentient sourdough starter. So this book is pretty out there. It has a lot of things. It has MacGyver-esque ways of using magic in unconventional ways. There is a secret plot against the government. There's lovable characters, interesting action scenes, and an interesting commentary on the ravages of war and how government officials are just humans too, and that's why they make so many dang mistakes, how we get the government that we deserve, and also how the military doesn't treat people that served under them in the best way. So there's a lot of meat in this narrative. It's not all whimsy. I cried only once, and I cry all the time in reads, but I only cried once, but it was still an incredibly cathartic, moving read, particularly towards the end. I loved the falling action. There were some beautiful passages. Definitely my favorite T. Kingfisher book I've read so far, and I've read about 5 or 6 of them. And now, for the biggest disappointment of April, Priest of Crowns by Peter McLean. This one was a stinker for me. It was incredibly disappointing. It is the last book in a quartet where I thought the first 2 installments were amazing. They were damn near perfect, in line with my taste. The 3rd installment was pretty dang good, probably only 3.5 out of 5 stars, but definitely a little bit of a dip, like middle book syndrome. Fun fact about this series, it was originally meant to be a trilogy, but the author felt like the plot needed a 4th book to not be cramped. So I was expecting fireworks for Priest of Crowns. In the first half, I was getting fireworks. People die and then you cry. Great moments happen and you cheer. Fun characters you love return to the scene, return to the narrative. And then the last half, the author just throws it all away. The ending was just resolved so quickly. Big bads are dealt with in a paragraph. They're just an afterthought. We weren't just anxious about how our protagonist is going to deal with these villains throughout the entire series. And then it just resolved so quickly. Characters die towards the end of this, and because they're killed off in such a anticlimactic, rushed way, you don't feel those emotions you're meant to feel. This series would make a great TV show, but the book ended in such an unsatisfying, not cathartic way. This is well on its way to becoming one of my favorite series until I finish Priest of Crowns. It'll probably still be on the bottom half of my top 10, but just so disappointing when a series you are adoring just ends with a fizzle, So 2.5, maybe 3 out of 5 stars for me. Incredibly disappointing. The last book I read in the month of April was System Collapse by Martha Wells, the latest installment in the Murderbot Diaries. Murderbot, it's space opera. It's a story about a cyborg who recently gained their agency. They can make their own decisions, and they're learning what it means to be an individual. They're learning what it means to make their own way in life. And the first story arc of this series, the first 4 or 5 installments, were great. But I'm not enjoying the second story arc all that much. The ending of System Collapse did save it. The novels in this series, they start off really clunky and slow-paced for me. The endings are always pulled off masterfully. Martha Wells does know how to finish off a story well. But I do hope this series ends relatively soon before she ruins a great thing. I feel like the last 2 installments haven't been as good as the first 5. So hopefully she returns to form and ends this story in a great way, because each installment's kind of getting a little worse. But this one does have my favorite character in the series front and center in the plot, so there's that. I read the most amazing manga in the month of April. I started and ended this manga series in only 3 days, maybe 3.5 days, and that manga is Orange. This manga had me in tears 5 times. The first 5 installments of this series were masterful. The premise of this manga is our main character receives a letter from the future, from herself 10 years in the future. And it says, this and this is going to happen today, and also you're going to meet this individual. And in 10 years, this individual is no longer alive. They're going to end their life, and I want you to save them. I just got chills just describing the premise, but This is a story about trying to convince one of your friends to stick around, trying to make them see the value in life, trying to make them see that life is worth living. So if you have traumas relating to any of those things, it could be a very triggering read, a very painful read at times. And it was very painful for me to read this manga series. But at the same time, it was incredibly therapeutic to watch these friends try to bring value and happiness to this character's life. And it was just a very moving story. I can't wait to post a series review about this manga in a week or two, because definitely my favorite manga of all time, even though I've only read 2 of them, but just masterfully pulled off. Volume 7 was not needed. It was just fan service, and I'm happy for it. But the first 5 volumes, perfect. Volume 6, near perfect. Volume 7, this series, 5 out of 5 stars for me. On April 1st, Our Fantasy started their bingo challenge for the year, and I'm super excited to be jumping into it this year. Of the reads I read, 4 of them satisfy the requirements for 4 slots on the bingo challenge. The slots I was able to cross out are Under the Surface because of Wellfall, Author of Color because of Sula, Survival because of Fiend, and Criminals because of Priest of Crowns. So I look forward to finishing this bingo challenge before March 31st of next year. I'm always looking for new authors to tackle, and the bingo challenge has a stipulation that an author can only make 1 appearance on the bingo board. So I think this will be a very adventurous year for me. So that's kind of exciting. So what is the book of the month? It is either Fiend or A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. Do I want funny and whimsical or ambitious and disturbing? I'll go with funny and whimsical. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking is my favorite read from the month of April. The first book of the month, I just started that just now because I can. I'm excited to see what May has in store. Hopefully I'm not going to get super sick and almost die. Hopefully pneumonia is not going to pay a visit to my household. Hopefully I don't rupture an eardrum like I did in March. I'm hoping May will be a very optimistic, incredibly productive month. And I think we're going to be able to do it. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'll talk to you guys next time.